thank you. Thank you for having me. My name is Ivan Velez. I'm a cartoonist, which is kind of rare because I'm one of those people who do the drawing and the writing for myself. I used to work for Marvel, DC Comics, Milestone back in the day, but I'm also known for doing my own comic book back in the 80s, like one of those first interventions for gay lesbian youth that came out at HMI, which is called Tales of the Closet. And I'm just doing a lot of stuff right now. And I'll show you some of that too as we do the program. I guess today we're doing Shoujo and Shonen, which is one of the three major subgenres of manga and anime. All right. Hi, Thomas. How old are you, Thomas? Thomas, you there? We also get shy students too. I have them in my class as well. So we're hoping. Oh, okay.
All right.
That's what it does too. That's right. So I can be frank and clear in my words today. Very cool. So I'm going to share a screen right now. And go back. This is Manga 101, Shoujo and Shonen. Okay, and maybe Chibi. We'll talk about that. My name is Ivan Velez. That's my website, planetbronx.com. I'm also at Popple Brand on Instagram. And you can see some of my work here. Again, I started in independent comic books, actually out of a social service agency back in like 1985. This was Tales of Closet. I used to do some work as well for the magazines, like Details magazine back then, which is no longer in service, I think. I was lucky enough to be asked to be the lead writer on Blood Syndicate, which was Milestone's team book. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of Milestone. Have you heard of Milestone at all? No? Milestone came out of they had some really talented people from Marvel and DC Comics got together, and they were Black creators. So they got together and they wanted to do a universe full of characters of color. I think they first started as African American characters, but then the head honcho, Dwayne McDuffie, realized that they needed to be diverse, like truly diverse. Like they had a lot of different things going on, including gender identity, which was something they brought me in for too. And they asked me to do. They saw Tales of Closet and they liked it so much that they asked me to do their team book. Now, it doesn't happen like that anymore. Nobody comes up and asks you to write their like mainstream comic book like that. But I was so lucky and happy to get in there. And of course, I added my diversity in there, which means I put Latinos, Asians. What was really good about Milestone is that you didn't have one type of person. You had all different types of person. You go diversity is like different shades, there's a skin tone, different classes, different gender orientations, different sexual orientations. So Blood Syndicate was a good way to kind of practice and put that in forward. And I was very happy that to be part of that team. With that, I started doing more mainstream comics. Like I worked for Marvel for a while. I used to write Static, Blood Syndicate, Venom, and the Ghost Rider. Now, Ghost Rider, this is one of the Spanish editions. The thing about when you work for mainstream comics is that you really work for hire. So when people publish your comic books in other countries, let's say, or in other formats, if they make a movie out of it and stuff like that, they have no obligation to pay you anything about that. So that's kind of one of the problems about American comic books. Cartoonists tend to stay really poor, and sometimes the creations that they create for other companies get really rich, and that's kind of like where it's kind of unfair on that. Unlike Japan, Japan's a little different system. We'll talk about that later. I used to do children's comics too. For DC Comics, I used to put out a lot of stuff based on the cartoons, like Powerpuff Girls. That's my girl, Jaja Jojo, the bride of Mojo Jojo. Scooby Doo, Ben 10, Dexter, which actually was one of my favorites, even though I wasn't that familiar with the cartoon, but once I saw it, I fell in love with it. And I was kind of lucky to be in that. But I also always did my little social service comics, which is something that cartoonists do. I did stuff for during the AIDS crisis. There was a lot of comics about what's going on, and you know what will happen if you find out you're HIV positive, or if your family was like that. Carrying Kind Chronicles is something I work with Jennifer Camper on. She works for this company that works with people who have issues with Alzheimer's. What to do if you have a family member that all of a sudden finds she has Alzheimer's, or he or she has Alzheimer's. As a caregiver, about resources, stuff like that. It's one of those comic books I think that's kind of successful in kind of helping people kind of reach the next thing. Let me hit the present thing. Might be a little better this way. Yeah, they look kind of better, right? And this is some of my old stuff. I'm doing my own comic book series right now. It's gonna take me years to finish it all, but I'm very happy that I got a choice. I got a grant to do this. This is the route based on the history of the Tainos, the Caribbean culture, and the rest of the comic book was the Ballad of Wankabam, which is the base of the people of color in America and the history, but using the superhero stories. Because if you look at Marvel and DC comics right now, they're very diverse now. But back in the day, I mean, when I was a kid, there were no characters of color at all. Not even on TV. And the fairy tales were like all from Europe. So, this was part of the change coming. And I'm very happy to kind of like still be part of the change a little bit, a little tiny bit, you know. Let me slow down. So we're talking about comics, right? Especially Japanese comics and manga and anime. And remember that manga is the comics, okay? It's the black, usually in black and white. It's produced very cheaply in Japan. It came out of this need. Remember that we fought a war with Japan and they lost. They were the only country to have 2 bombs dropped on them, 2 nuclear bombs. So the country was in shambles after that. Money was hard to get by, food was hard to get, and the whole system was kind of changing, going through all these changes. And a lot of people were kind of suffering for that. So comics were a way to kind of like help the kids. They used a lot of the scrap metal to create metal toys for the kids, and they started doing these comic books, these adventure stories to kind of entertain the kids and take their mind off of some of the problems that are going on. So manga came out of a good place back then. I mean, it was always there, but particularly after the war, it really helped a lot of people. This manga, Astro Boy was created by Osamu Tezuka, considered the grandfather of manga. He was the #1 person who used to do the shonen stuff. We'll talk about shonen, but he also did a lot of shoujo stuff. The #1 person in shoujo, at least the pioneer, was Machiko Hasegawa, and she created this everyday woman who went through all the changes that her country went to, the starvation, the displacement, the refugee status, all this kind of stuff that she had to go through, trying to find work, trying to find food for her family, trying to get a regular job. She went through it, and it was this daily strip and then more of a manga, and it went on to the 70s. And this character would age and the family and people, she became one of those characters that people followed and loved because she was so human and so like everybody else. So that's basically the forerunner of shoujo, where it's more based on real life, maybe emotions, family status, that kind of thing. Okay, so shoujo, the girl stuff. Now people spell it differently. Some people spell it with a shoujo. Americans like to do it really short, so we say shoujo, and it really means girl comics, kind of like feminine. It's a style. Okay, now doesn't mean that boys can't read it, and doesn't mean that only women can write it or draw it. It means that anyone can do it, but the style is a set style, and people understand it when they see it right away. They know it's shoujo. So they tend to be emotional, school oriented, a lot of school oriented stuff, relationship based, a lot of family stories, a lot of relationship between friends and who they are, a lot of romances, but also kind of like conflicts between characters. Pretty romantic and gentle are the stereotypes. But if anybody reads manga now, they'll know that a lot of the shoujo stuff kind of goes against that pretty romantic, gentle stuff. People are kind of fighting with that stereotype, and that's a good thing too, because the world changes and not everybody has to conform to stereotypes. And the fighting style, we always talk about fighting style in comics because when they had characters, especially in anime, there's going to be a fight sometime. So with the girls, they believe in Japan, they believe that girls are more thoughtful, they plan more. So you'll see that in the fights. They'll plan more, maybe they turn around 3 times, the gear comes in, the hair gets perfect, the shields come up, all the magic wells up, and then they fight, okay? Not like the boys. The boys are a little different, and we'll talk about that too, okay? Now, again, Seiza-san was a character that Machiko Hasegawa created. That's her. Isn't she cool looking right there? And you know, when she passed away in the 70s, people really, they held a national funeral for her because she was so beloved. This is from Tezuka, Osamu Tezuka. He created this character who actually was a princess by day, and at nighttime she dressed like a prince and fight crime and kind of help her kingdom. And very popular. This is Candy Candy. Now, Candy Candy, oh my God. If you look at the big eye, that big eye thing was actually created by the male cartoonist because some of them, their male characters weren't selling well, or they just weren't be published. So they created this idea of making these big, like, dewy eye characters and selling them to the girls, and they became very rich and famous very quickly because of that style. And that style kind of stuck. Now, I tell people that the reason why Japanese characters have big eyes is because of Mickey Mouse. Because when they saw the old Mickey Mouse cartoons, the black and white ones, they fell in love with that style, the whole thing, and most of the characters started having big eyes. But these super big eyes right there started right in the Shoujo comics, because look at the eyelashes and like, kind of like those wet, dewy eyes. And it became a thing, and you can still see them today in these comics. Rumiko Takahashi. Oh my God, if anybody ever knows Inuyasha, she's like, she's rumored to be the most rich woman in Japan, because everything she touches is gold. And she's written the story, and she started out as an artist, and people started liking her stuff. But when she did stuff like, for instance, I'm going to show a little video of her, not too much of it. Oh, this theme song.
Rumiko Takahashi was born on October 10th, 1957 in Niigata Prefecture, Japan. She is considered to be one of the wealthiest women in the country. Takahashi began to get in the manga world when she was only in university. She won the Shogakukan Manga Award twice in 1980 and in 2001, first for Yurusei Yatsura and second for Inuyasha. Her current career began in 1978. Takahashi is known for three major series: Yurusei Yatsura, Ranma 1/2, and Inuyasha. Rumiko graduated from Japan Women's University. Takahashi is considered to be the queen of manga. She has a strong fear and hatred of earthquakes. She admits she has no desire to be married. In 2014, Takahashi was nominated for the Eisner Hall of Fame awards given at San Diego Comic-Con. Kyokai no Rine was Rumiko's first new manga series since the ending of Inuyasha in 2008. Takahashi's parents were originally against her manga dreams. Takahashi has A positive blood type. Most of her work in the 1980s were short stories and small comics. She is the best-selling female comic writer at the time of this recording.
I love that kids can basically make their own videos, like a book report. It's so cute. But yeah, she's pretty popular in Japan. Her style is very, very iconic. Okay, she has a really beautiful ease with it. Her skill is really high, so she makes things look effortless. But they're really beautifully done. Now, when manga artists or mangakas work, they usually have a team that works with them. So when she first started off, she did most of the stuff by herself. But the more you start making money, the more your deadlines have to get quicker and quicker. You need a team around you. So there's a lot of these artists who want to be like manga artists and who want to learn, so they become your apprentice. And they work in a team to do your backgrounds, to do your coloring, to do your lettering. It's a wonderful system, and I wish America was more like that. They take really low pay, which is not a good system. But the more the person gets famous, the more they come up as well, and that's a good thing. Okay, so let's go back to presentation. Now, Ramen 1/2 was I was asking about this before. Talking about gender issues and queer issues very early on. This is like in the 80s, and this was very popular comic book where basically a character gets wet and they turn into a girl. You know, what happens is they go to a haunted pond, and it's haunted by every pond in this area is haunted by a different kind of character. So this person who's a warrior, who's like a fighter, gets wet in this pond and has the body of a girl afterwards until he dries. And then there's another one who's a panda, another one who's a penguin, another one who's a little pig. But it's just like this kind of like weird, kind of goofy interest. And there's a lot of love interest between the characters. And a girl likes her. There's a girl who likes him when he's a boy. There's another girl who likes him when she's a girl. There's a guy who kind of likes him when he's a girl. There's a guy who likes him when he's a guy. So it's like all these kind of interesting things. And it was a very popular series who kind of played with that. And it couldn't get on American TV, but there was a lot of those old VHS tapes you can get back in the day. Rumik Theater is very fun too. If you ever want to get Rumiko Takahashi, if you can get one of the collections, they're probably in most libraries. but they're her short stories, and it's about people who know each other. It's like in a boarding house, and it's very kind of gets her flavor there. But she does horror as well. Inuyasha is of course very popular now. There's like the children of Inuyasha and that girl, I forgot her name. They have a new series out now. Mermaid Saga is the most scariest horror thing I've ever read. Even though the characters are so cute looking, the horror is pretty intense. So I warn this against kids reading this. But if you're a young adult and who wants to see something more adult themed, the Mermaid Saga is pretty good. Okay. And then this is Clamp. Now look how beautiful these characters are. We're going to do a little demo of how to draw characters like them. But Clamp had this style. It's there's 3 or 4. They keep sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 4. These are like college women. They met each other in college. I think it's 4, and they basically get together to do comics. And the product that comes out is these beautiful, stylized, very feminine, very big eye characters who are very popular. This is again real quick.
From having 11 members that created fan-made mangas in the 1980s to becoming one of the most globally acclaimed group of mangaka, Clamp has crafted a stylistic multiverse that is truly their own.
It is 4.
So cute. In time, their members decreased from 11 to 4. The 4 remaining from the original 11 are composed of Nanase Okawa, who is the writer, leader, and often the group spokesperson, Mokona, who does initial sketches and storyboard, while Tsubaki Nekoi and Satsuki Igarashi are responsible for the line work, inking, and overall execution of design. The 4 members have mentioned that they check on each other's work too, making them both mentors and assistants to each other in their careers. You know it's a work of Clamp if there is a focus on the themes of fate and soulmates, particularly on the idea that love transcends gender, age, and essentially the physiological. For example, the relationship between Yukiko and Toya is subtle and brotherly. There's loving concern for them, as featured in Cardcaptor Sakura. You would see decadent and delicate shoujo type of artwork, often with beautiful characters in extravagant outfits, group jargons after years of working together, and assistants would only slow them down. Okawa, being the writer and leader of the group, cites thrillers and mystery novels for inspiration, while Igarashi has mentioned Sato Satoru's A Tale from a Small Island as a childhood favorite and a work that impacted her.
So their influence are very strong, and everybody's manga after they came on the scene. They're very popular. Everything from Sailor Moon. If you notice, Sailor Moon has that kind of style. They're not created by Clamp, but they have a Clamp feeling. Utena was really like a wonderful. Again, the 2 characters, both the same gender, are deeply in love with each other, and they kind of play with like all these ideas. So shoujo is a very accepting, very comfortable, very emotional form of art, which is very popular in the world. I was going to show you the one of the transitions, because how can you talk about shoujo without seeing the magical girls transform? So I'll do a little bit of that, but we gotta get to drawing too. I get drunk on that stuff. It's too good. It's too good. So this is some of the top stories. Shoujo Beat was a very influential magazine, and we'll talk about the manga system in a second. But I just want to give you a little bit of the kind of different manga that comes out. So
Take all of your wasted on. Say what you need to say. Say what you need to say. Say what you need. Even if your hands are shaking. Say what you need to say.
Now,
Say what you need to say.
some big eyes in there. But you're all going to see kind of very slim, handsome men or young teenage boys. And that's another part of shoujo where the love interest is a very strong influence in the story. So a lot of those romantic stuff have that as well. There's a subgenre called Shonen Ai, which is a stories totally about boys who fall in love with each other, and that is read by girls, usually teenage girls. Teenage girls, college age girls, anything above that, they go into the higher end genres. But Shonen Ai is so popular that they have like an entire. I remember when I went to Tokyo, there's an entire building, and on the seventh floor, the entire floor was just basically Shonen Ai stories. And people were having tea, and it was like really nice, kind of wet. The music was like kind of chimes, and it was just like a nice space to be in. But again, very very feminine because of course that's created by women for girls, which is kind of interesting. Unlike gay comics that are created for boys by men or for men, that's a kind of different genre and not as gentle as the female genre. And this is one of the things I'm really recommending, which is Wandering Sun by Shimura Takako, who is actually about a transgender boy, and it's done totally, this story is done realistically, tenderly, and done in a way that doesn't ever make fun of the person's situation where he's a young born boy, but really feels inside in his heart that he's female. So he dresses as a girl to go to school, and what happens after that. Okay, so it's very cool. Let's cut to a shoujo demo. Let me see. Let me start to share. I'm not used to kind of like doing programs without people talking to me on the screen. So
I was gonna say that was I was really enjoying the Sailor Moon segment.
isn't it cool? I know. Sailor Mercury. The only thing sad about Sailor Moon to me is like, for one thing, in most of the places where it showed in America, it was like 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning.
Ooh, yeah, it's early.
I know that it became very popular with gay men. They got up that early just to watch it before they go to work. And I know that they totally cut out the relationship between Sailor Neptune and Sailor Uranus. They made them cousins, and they kind of blocked everything and all the language, and they cut out scenes. It was a very progressive story for that time. Come on, it was done in like the 80s, and they talked frankly about it, and it was without shame. So that's kind of a wonderful thing that they experienced in Japan, but we didn't experience here. Okay, let's go to a demo. Did I do a demo properly? Hold on a second. I want to make sure my screen is open and return to paint. Yes, I do. There you go. Right, here comes this. Shared my screen. So if you want to do your own shoujo stuff, okay, first, I would say relax a little bit, have a cup of tea next to you, kind of let some nice kind of quiet music, get into that mood, get to that head, and just have fun with it. Now, of course, again, that genre is not only for young girls. It can be enjoyed by anyone, and that's the brilliance of Japanese comics. They're for everybody. And they have genres, like subgenres for older people, for younger people, for people in different professions. I mean, it's just a brilliant thing. Okay, my real pencil. I'm using a program called Clip Studio. Okay, but I expect if anybody wants to draw along, that they just have pencil and paper, they'll be fine. Okay, I'm gonna try to use my pencil tool. So when you do shoujo, right? First, think about, I'm gonna do bust, which is kind of like just the head and shoulders first. Okay. Now you notice that I kind of did a round head here, and then you're gonna do a neck and shoulders, okay? Now, I like to do shoulders at an angle like that, so that way it gives a little bit of depth to the character. So I can have her like this, but it also gives a mood, when a person's in the shoulder like that, there's a flavor to it. So when you do the eyes, you can do that cross, okay? If you're gonna do kind of like a 3D thing, think about the head as a 3D plane, like round, and kind of do the cross in a 3D way, okay? Anyone kind of got that? All right, so eyes. Now, since you're gonna draw, if you're gonna do a super feminine, very mega big eye character, I will go with really big eyes. It's very similar to chibis. Chibis are these really cute characters. They're kind of done for young people, but they're the most popular character in the world. They have great toys. You can do actually the fish eye, kind of like Archie Comics. If anybody knows Archie Comics, the girls have that little fish tail at the eyes. Now the eyes. Remember when you do the eyes, kind of like do a half eye or 3/4 eye. Never do this side because then it looks like they're bugged out. I'm surprised, and then it turns into a horror comic. You don't want to do that. Right? Eyebrows are very important depending on the angle. Now remember that they tend to be shaped. Okay. Now the nose. Now you can start with a little nose. The smaller the better because the eyes are going to be like the main focus. So you even put nostrils, but if you want to do the little nostrils here, I'm going to do a character of color because this is what we need more of the world. Manga, because it's a homogenous country, since it's only Asian and indigenous people, by the way, Ainu is a very big indigenous population there. They tend not to do characters of color that well. They include them now because it's a global market, but they tend not to do them perfect. You know, it's a lot of American stereotypes they get from the movies that we watch. Okay, so you notice that little face there, right? Now, if you're going to do a 3D plane, again, her nose is going to be around here. The mouth is going to be around here. So you can play with the little shape. I'll have her looking at you. All right. And then a little bit of a bow mouth. Now, bow mouth is basically like this, right? Kind of like, oh, anyone wants to come in? All right, like that. Okay, that's kind of like a bow mouth. If you want to, you want to just do the line, make sure you do the bottom lip and then the upper like that. Okay. If you want to do a tiny mouth, some people just like to do these little tiny mouths, you can as well. Again, these are stereotypes a little bit of like really, really cute. They're kind of based on dolls. Okay, now the head, of course, the ear is going to be around where the eyebrows is and where the nose is. So depending on who you are, if you want to do like a realistic ears, they're going to look a little odd sometimes because they're so big. So you're going to make them a little smaller just to kind of fit the side of her eyes, okay? Now, again, you can make her chin either round or a little sharp. Like older characters tend to have sharper chins. And then hair is like so important, right? So remember you have a skull line here. Everything's going to be shaped. The more florid, the more beautifully done, better. There's nothing better than manga hair. If you were born with manga style hair, then you're pretty lucky because that hair gets everybody's attention, okay? Now, if you're going to do curly hair, you can actually do the shape first instead of being stuck in doing the curls and then kind of add the curls later, okay? Now, this is super feminine, very candy, but not so feminine. She doesn't have that much makeup on, right? If she had that much makeup, it comes later with the colors where you put like cheeks, like kind of stuff. That's that kind of style. That's the very girly style. Okay, again, let's go like this. Little tiny nose, big eyes. Now the eyes, the eyeball, right? You can play with the reflections. Some people just put two shapes like that and kind of play with it. The more reflections you do, the more wet. If the character looks like they're about to cry, you're doing the right thing. All right, so I will do 2 dots right there. That's a quick way of doing that kind of reflection. Of course, if you color it, her eyes will be different colors. If you're gonna do brown, make sure you put that light hazel in there as well. If you're gonna do blue, put little flecks of green, all that kind of stuff, okay? So that's that. Like this, chin, her ears, and then again, the hair. There's another way of doing hair that kind of like line hair, like that straight black, beautiful black hair that a lot of the characters have, okay? And then the clothing, just kind of, if you want to do Lolita, which is kind of like very florid kind of clothing, you can, very roughly. But most people do the schoolgirl. which is basically a collar, maybe a bow sometimes, or a tie, you know, and the white collar shirt with short sleeves. Okay, that's a simple type. Now let me change to another more realistic type. Okay, what time is it now? I'll make sure. Okay, here we go. Circle, right? More realistic head. All right, but they're still going to be kind of fashionable. They tend to be a little bit fashionable, so you can actually, if you want to do the body kind of long, right? Her limbs kind of long. You treat it like a puppet. So basically, you're going to do the joints, right? Or if you're going to do more realistic, you can do like the whole thing where you put the top, the middle, and the triangle for the pelvis. Okay, joints, shoulder, shoulder, hip, hip, and that gives you more flexibility, particularly if you're doing animation or characters that look like they're moving. See this skeleton right there? It doesn't really look like anything. Put the cross. You're going to do a little bit more Christian style, which means the line is going to be on top, higher. Instead of a bullseye, it's going to be more of a that way. Okay. All right. Let me I'm going to make this a little bit more. Now, remember, if you're going to do younger characters have bigger heads and smaller bodies. So if you're going to do young girl stories, like which is very popular, remember, the older they get, the bigger the head gets in proportion. No, the smaller the head gets in proportion to the body. Excuse me. Okay, so here we go. When you're going to do a girl, let's say this looks like the teacher. So let's give her like a little sweater vest. All right. If you're going to do the chest, remember chest, you just go out and in a little bit. Okay. The only place where they're really over endowed are a lot of shonen stuff. We'll talk about that, why, but they tend to overdo it with the girl's chest in those stories. It's a thing. It's like it's an adolescent thing. That's exactly what it is. Okay, and you see this here. Of course, the more magical, the more flowy the character is, the more kind of like ethereal they get. If you're doing clamp, you know the hair is going to be all over the place and all many different designs. You can still do very big eyes. Now this is pencil. Remember when you use pencil, do it lightly and then go in with the inks afterwards, okay? If I were you, I would get, this is stuff called vellum, which is kind of like a tracing paper, but it's stronger. It has a little bit more tooth to it and you can draw with it. A lot of advertising people use that. And a lot of cartoonists use that as well, okay? Let's make her, I'm gonna give her a top ponytail, all right? That's very kind of manga right now. It's always a girlfriend with the ponytail. I'm gonna give her a tie. And let's give her the school jacket. And afterwards, you can just play. Don't they look like kind of like the Misfit styles, those kind of things? And then, of course, the skirt is going to be very important. Now, you know that in depending on the character, the skirt level rises up. If the girl is more free and more like it's also a class thing too. If she's like a rich girl who's a little spoiled, the skirt's going to be hiked up a little bit. Just because that's kind of like a shorthand for people who kind of like more free and a little bit more rude sometimes, because they're probably mean to some people too. Again, character traits. I'm gonna put little socks. Actually, no, the socks should be up here. It's Americans that have the Bobby socks, right? So when they use the eraser and kind of like erase what you want. Now, I'm hoping that this little demo is gonna be on I guess it's gonna be on the internet. But my style is very loose, very quick. I tend to draw really fast, so I take a lot of shortcuts. Of course, we don't expect anyone who's just trying this out to draw as fast. And you need to learn how to take your time when you need to, okay? And just kind of practice. And that's why I say draw lightly with the pencil first. Don't be like me, pressing too hard just to show a line, okay? All right, now if you're gonna do the teacher's a little bit older. Maybe she's wearing like slacks. This is the 70s, is bell bottoms, right? Okay, and maybe she's kind of like, she's no nonsense, excuse me, that kind of thing. With teachers, with adults, it can be a little bit more formal because they tend to adults tend to be a lot more formal because they really represent authority. So they tend to have like, you know, like the principal jackets, that kind of thing. Well, unless they're moms. Moms are just very relaxed and, you know, not that well dressed because they're busy. They don't have time for that. Okay. And then the eyes, glasses if you want to. Glasses are a big thing for manga. Learn how to make your glasses. And again, her hair, probably a very remember, the wind doesn't affect her hair as much. It's funny when you see some manga or some anime, the teenage girls' hairs are all over the place. They're like floating in the wind. And then when there's an adult next to them, that her hair won't move. So they're saying a lot. And again, when you're doing little girls, the same thing. Bigger eyes. Simple clothing. Don't get too detailed with them. If you want to do that kind of Lolita, kind of overdressed stuff, it doesn't look that great unless they're chibi. Chibis are kind of exaggerations of cuteness, but you want to be very simple when you have the kids. Okay, because more about the young, how innocent they are, how young they are, how they're kind of starting out in life, and if they're dressed too, let's say I'm gonna give her shorts and big feet. They always throw kids with really big feet because they're easier to animate, I think. Okay. I'm going to tie her hair back as well. Okay. All right, that's the shoujo part. So if you look at American comic books, there are certain characters that kind of fit into that. Archie comics used to fit into that. The old stuff, not the new stuff. The new stuff is very adult and odd. Okay, let's share this one. Let's go to Shonen. Now, Shonen stuff. Now, Shonen is very popular. Shoujo Beat was a big magazine. Now, this is the way people read comics in Japan. They'll come once a week comes a big kind of like digest, a really kind of fat magazine in black and white, and it's really cheaply done in cheap paper, so they can recycle it easy. There's places where you can just bring the recycled stuff easy. There's a lot of stores that sell them late. So let's say they get the old copies, and you could buy a copy for like 100 yen, which is almost $1, that kind of thing. But they sell for about $4 or $5. They're really fat, maybe 10 to 15 stories in the inside. And every chapter comes out every week. So it's like a TV station. This is where you get your anime or your stories, depending on the company. So that's where you read Dragon Ball or One Piece, all that kind of stuff, Demon Slayer. They come on that format. And then later on, they put the stories all together, right? For later on. Most people read comics like that. They're very popular that way. So Shonen Beat, is it Shonen Beat? Shonen Jump, excuse me, it's Shoujo Beat. Shonen Jump is the one for boys, in boys style. So boys style is very popular. It's like the bestseller in Japan. Right now, Demon Slayer is the biggest cartoon. We'll talk about that soon. But again, they're more, I spelled that wrong, didn't I? Adventure. It should be adventure. Oops. Excuse my spelling there, but it should be adventure with an E. So I'm going to do that right now. Because I might use this again. All right, so they tend to be masculine, which means boyish, right? The characters are more aggressive, more adventure-oriented stories, more battles. They always have a fight, a big battle and stuff like that. They're less mysteries. Mysteries really lend themselves to shoujo, where the girls have to figure out a big mystery. That's kind of like part of the storylines there too. More Scooby-Doo, that kind of thing. Scooby-Doo will be considered, I think, shoujo, because it's very kind of gentle in a way, and then nobody ever gets hurt. But the battles are very important. Kids are shielded with their emotions, which means they're very shy around each other, particularly if there's another two genders. They're very shy around it that way, right? Very angry boys, very tough, very impulsive. That's a fighting style. Boys fight each other like they don't think about it. I gotta win. And the hair gets big and they fight. All the powers. Dragon Ball has fights that last for like 2 or 3 episodes. They think because they think in Japan boys are more impulsive when it comes to that kind of thing, which is kind of true. Boys tend to be more aggressive, impulsive. They got to win at any cost, that kind of thing, especially in the beginning. That's the style. Now, remember that it's just a style, and people like to play with this style. They like to play the shoujo style and kind of play and kind of twist it a little bit. if you notice that the biggest seller right now, Demon Slayer, um, is written by women, and the characters are very femininely drawn, but it's a very violent, very aggressive. The fights are just like what you need in shonen stories, but it's done by women, and they kind of play with that idea. If you look at Naruto, Naruto is a very beautiful story. The fights are very beautifully done, very stylistic. And if all the boys and the girls have like beautiful hair, you know they're looking for a female audience as well. So that kind of works that way, right? Which is Shonen. This is the first animation coming to America from Japan. Oh, and I stopped. I pressed the wrong button right now. On your mission today, in the town, down and the black, or everything is power for boy. And so boy as you fly, strange new world you will find. And now, get propelled, mighty monsters fly in the sky. And so boy I'm getting memories right now. Excuse me. Will you find friends of foe? Cosmic Ranger, lots of danger. Everything is go after boy. Red will cheer you. You're a hero. As you go after boy. No more. Osamu Tezuka created this character. Now he was kind of like a scientist, kind of very nerdy guy, a science nerd. He loved bugs. He was a doctor. He was going to medical school and stuff like that. But he started doing these comics for kids, and they just took off. They went they went crazy, and he created this genre. He's really the one who created like the way shonen looks, particularly for the kids. That whole big eye, tough kid character being with powers, and he did stories for adults as well later on. But these stories here are kind of like the national cartoons of Japan. I mean, the train station plays his theme song, so it's like a wonderful thing. It's the first anime to come to America, 1964. I remember because I'm that old and I remember it. And people went crazy. People fighting in their underwear, jumping around, fighting monsters, that kind of thing. And it was emotional too because the stories would continue, the characters would come back, and it wasn't just a one-off with like most American comic books, cartoons were back then. They had stories and had characters and they had evolution in their storylines. Um, Another story that came, another one, the first color one for Japan was Kimba the White Lion, which is the total basis for the Lion King. If you ever see the Lion King, and the fact that they created the Lion King the year that Tezuka died is a very telling thing. The story is almost exactly the same. With the same, they even have like a Scar, Dark Lion, who's like the villain, that kind of stuff. Uh, but he created that story, and it was this beautiful emotional stories that a lot of people do. This is a picture of him. I'm not going to show you a video of him, but he was very, very influential, and he was considered one of the geniuses of Japan for the longest time. But he looked so tired. He just drawing all the time. Um, these are some of his characters, just a few of them, including the older line. I went to the museum. I'll show you a picture of that there. So he did a lot of shoujo stuff too, which was story. He thought that girls should get adventure stories too, that girls could get like stuff that they were interested in. So he did mermaid stories and princess stories. The princess who had to fight as boys because they couldn't get attention. He actually did a lot for the magical girl genre too, which is a big thing. Sailor Moon and all the characters of magic. He was one of the ones who first started doing those stories, and he watched those this one movie about a witch in this English movie, and it was like this really kind of like one like a parlor comedy about a witch, a woman had magical powers, and that kind of started him off in that thing. Oh, what if little girls had magical powers? That kind of thing. So it was kind of cool. So this is basically his drawing style. He did some amazing stuff, some really head trippy stuff, some really dark stuff, and stuff that makes you cry. I mean, I remember when I read Buddha, he did a history of Buddha in his manga form, and this thing made me cry. Like the first two volumes were like just like, oh my goodness. This is his museum that I got to go to. Like, oh, I'm so happy to go there. The other characters that followed that were very popular in America, Toboy the Ape Man. He was this android with superpowers. He used to fight missions. The problem with him and why he didn't become more popular in America is because he had to smoke a nuclear cigarette to get powers. So he had an atomic cigarette, and he would light up. And I think they would sell the candy nuclear cigarettes in Japan, but not over here. And then Prince Planet and stuff like that. You can see why that's a problem, right? And Marine Boy was great too. And Marine Boy, his best friend was the mermaid and a talking dolphin. And his father, they had a sea city under. His father was a scientist who created this city under the sea, and he went on adventures. A very cool thing. And to breathe underwater, he would chew a piece of oxygum. I remember every time he needed to. And sometimes the villain would like take his oxygum away, and then he'd be drowning. And of course, you got Dragon Ball, you got Naruto. Naruto went on for 15 years. It used to be the #1 comic book. Then One Piece took that for a while. But the #1 comic book right now, by the way, one comic of Dragon Slayer, of even One Piece, outsells the entire Marvel universe. And when you think about American comic books as being kind of expensive, 20 pages of art for about $4 or $5 now, how they kind of trick you into buying the other sister titles that month because they continue the story in other comic books to kind of force you to buy stuff like that. They forget that American kids probably don't have a lot of money like that. They really totally forgot the concept of what comic books were for. When I was a kid, 20 cents. You used to get 5 for $1. You used to get like an 80-page giant for 25 cents. It used to be a big thing back then. But no, they forgot about that. And that's why American comic books are really not selling, and they're really only there to kind of license for TV shows and movies and toys and stuff like that. All right. So this is Shonen Jump, a quick little thing of their characters and their style. The most popular style in the world, by the way. That's a lot. It's a lot. It's like it overrides your senses sometimes. I'm going to show you a quick demo on how to do shonen stuff. Okay, now shonen is exactly the same kind of rules as the shoujo stuff. It's just a little bit more masculine, a little bit more adventure oriented. So the drawings can be a little dynamic, but you can do that same thing with shoujo stuff. Remember, it's just a style, and it's a genre that kind of attracts all genders. Okay. Let's go to Clip Studio. Okay, here we go. I'm going to change my page. All right. Now, you notice how American style comics, they tend to have muscles, right? American comics for boys, and let's face it, American comics were all made for boys back in the day. You would have like some comics for girls or teenage girls, like Archie or Kitty Keene, that kind of stuff. You had the kid comics were very gentle, but the girls were very girl friendly, like Little Dot and Casper and Richie Rich. But they really didn't think that the girls were interested in comics that much, so they kind of ignored them a lot, and especially with the superhero stuff. It wasn't until after the 60s and the 70s where the people started realizing that girls were buying comics too. And I think it's because the manga sales were kind of hitting them hard. They realized, say, who's buying this manga? Well, more manga is bought by women than by men. So you got to think about that. They're a big market out there, and you have to kind of include them in everything. And now people are understanding that people of color are there too, and they were totally ignored by the market. All right, so when you draw a manga guy, remember, depending on the age, the bigger head, the smaller, right? So excuse me, the bigger head, the smaller the age. So remember, head is like a balloon, the string is the spine. Okay, so this kind of helps with that. Let's do another character over here. Right now, if you want to do a spine like really extreme, you can follow the torso around that line, and that really helps. Okay, now Adventure Time will be considered shonen as well. Although it's very friendly for girls, it still kind of like has the qualities of the Adventure Boy comics. Okay, like this. Now, again, if you're going to follow it, this is more of a younger character. So again, smaller torso, smaller legs, bigger feet. For some reason, I like that. Okay, you can play with that. Now, if you're going to do younger, older, they can be that lean type. Or if you want to go with the big adventurer, kind of whose strength is better, it's more American style. And I'll teach you how to do that pretty soon. But let me get these guys done first. Okay. Now notice how I did a skeleton really fast. I just know the joints are basically 1, 2, 3, right? Shoulder, elbow, wrist, shoulder, elbow, wrist. Don't forget the wrists and the ankles. Okay, they're a joint too. I'm sure the older you get, you'll never forget your ankles and your wrists because they're gonna hurt all the time. All right, so again, across. The younger the character is, the lower that line is in the face because that's how we're built. Our eyes are a really big part of our head, the younger we are, and then they just get smaller in proportion to everything else. Okay. Now this character here, I'm gonna have him look like a dancer, right? Okay, right. So if you're gonna do a kid, again, shoulder. See how I'm running him out? By the way, shoulders are never like this. We don't have like these great shown pointy shoulders. Okay, we have this muscle there, so we kind of go down like a slope. All right, so you know that's part of the neck goes in, but the back, is that the deltoid that goes out like that? Okay, again for this character here, they go in, but there's also that deltoid. Depending on the character, if it's stronger, they're going to be bigger. You're going to get more of like a real triangle. The smaller slope, it means they're kind of more gently built or thinner built. Okay. Now you notice that the character right here where the torso is, you go in the middle. Okay. We're not like SpongeBob. You know, SpongeBob has straw legs like that, coming out like that, like popsicle sticks. We're not like that. We're kind of split in the middle. So think when you draw your skeleton, know that you're going to split them there. Now it's funny because when American comic books for the longest time, they would draw like the superheroes and they come to a point there. Just give a wrinkle or two like that. Be kind of like that because, you know, we have anatomy and we just want to make sure that it's respectful and just, if you erase it, it looks weird to me. There's a secret too. American superheroes, whenever they had a scene when they took off their shirt, all of a sudden their nipples would disappear. And that's kind of a weird thing too. That's very strange. All right, so notice the kid looks younger. It looks more like the kid in My Hero Academia, right? Which is, by the way, one of the most popular long-running shonen right now. And it's funny how they play with the idea of the girls, you know, the girls being over-endowed and kind of top-heavy. That's a point. It's kind of like the stereotype that force girls into sometimes in shonen comic books. So thank goodness for stuff like Naruto and stuff like that. It's more respectful with the characters. Whenever you have girls who are as powerful as the boys, you know that the characters are going to be very respectful for each other and more fair. That's why I love Demon Slayer so much. Okay, go like this, all right? Notice I put the knee here. Now, depending on the kind of clothing, if you're going to do like that kind of like superhero or kind of costume, notice that characters in Dragon Ball, they wear the same suit every day. You never see them go to the laundry. So maybe that power comes out. It's kind of like the smell. I don't know. Okay, go like this. So you notice that when I did the wrists and the hands, I just kind of did a square. And then I put the thumb on one side and kind of do the curled fingers on the other to make like a fist, right? Some people, they do hands this way, where you do a rectangle, thumb on one side, 4 fingers on the other, and that's the quickest way to do hands, okay? That will attach to anything. Remember that if you're going to do this going down, thumb on one side, 4 fingers, and this is a quick way to kind of draw a quick sketch, and then you play with it and fix it the way you want to later on, okay? So I'm going to have his hands open here. Maybe he's kind of like, all right. Eyes. Again, his eyes are going to be higher and smaller. Big though, because manga, right? But not so super big. You want to be more realistic. It's just a style, right? It's a style. Just like American comic, DC Universe, everybody is like, everyone has like a gym in the house because they're all so muscular. But that's kind of what they do. They think that kids want to see the ideal, or what they think is the ideal body, and that's what it is. Superman has to have muscles because he's strong. He's shorthand, you know. Notice that they don't do that with the girls. Like Wonder Woman does not look like The Rock, you know? Okay, here we go. So that's kind of like a younger guy too. He looks like a teenager. Okay, so again, smaller. If you want to do an adult, I'm gonna erase this guy, the dancing guy here. Oh, look, he's dancing a lot. All right. And hair, when you do hair as well, I'm gonna put as longer. See, when you do this more kind of like grown-up type proportions, or people who are kind of like not as thin as most of the characters are in anime. In anime, there's always like everybody's thin unless you have like one friend who's like a little thicker. And that's not true in America. Most people are not fitting that thin kind of stereotype, particularly in the Bronx. I'm from the Bronx. People here eat a lot. We're beefy, okay, like that. So that's more like a proportion, smaller head, okay. So you notice that this is all shorthand, and later on, after you do that, you start inking, you start playing with the pencil and the lines, start playing with the hair, right? A lot of people like to do that kind of like anime hair, which is just very pointy. If you notice like this, if you're gonna do Dragon Ball hair, it's mostly like that. Again, Dragon Ball hair, Goku, his hairstyle does not move, kind of like Mickey Mouse. You know, Mickey Mouse has a head, and no matter how he turns his head, it's gonna be like that, you know? So kind of plays like that. You can do a lot of shortcuts with them. It's more like a superhero type stuff because they really lend to that kind of genre. Now, of course, more horror-based, you know, the older you are, they have manga. They realized pretty early on that a lot of people were not leaving manga. They were getting older, but they were still reading the comics. So they had people like Naruto age. So every year they would get older and older until now he's like has a family. And then you have like the stories for his kids, and they know that the backstock of stories are there for the new people getting into the stories and just starting, right? So they kind of work that way. His face looks really strange, so I'm gonna give him a mustache. A lot of mustache guys in manga. Kind of short hair. So that's kind of like basically, I'm gonna make him bald and put a little star in here. So if anybody watches stuff like Avatar, The Last Airbender, or even like stuff like Korra, Avatar is more for the kids and Korra is more for the teenagers. If you notice the style of the characters, they look older. The kind of storylines are a little bit more adult, because they understand that the young kids want something a little bit more older now, and they kind of did that for them. And this is the way manga and anime work. They'll have the target audience gets older, so they'll create stuff just for them. And now there's a lot of stuff that's very kind of like violent or bloody or like really kind of like thought-provoking. The issues they deal with are very, very real. And those are more for the people who are with manga for a long time. They're getting older and older and they're appreciating it, you know? That's a great thing when people appreciate, you know, your work. And I think they understand that. So that was, what time is it now? Oh my goodness. Does anybody have any questions for me? Because I talked so long.
I just want to say that was amazing watching how quick you get these sketches down, and they're just they come to life so quickly before your eyes. Like I don't know, I'm just crazy impressed right now. That was awesome.
Thank you, but it's a lot of practice. That's what it is.
Yes.
And since I have to use a lot of shorthand to kind of get the points across, you'll find that with a lot of cartoonists, they know how to do that quick sketch, you know?
Yeah.
What's more frustrating for us is like doing the story and making sure it looks like in your head on the page. Oh, there's somebody else there. Somebody's only good at copying. Well, that's part of the learning how to draw. First, when you're young, first you copy. Now, tracing paper is usually something really good for little kids because they start drawing the forms and see how the lines are connected with the tracing paper. Then they copy it next to it. They put an image there and they'll start copying next to them. Then they'll start mimicking it in their own drawing. So they're like, oh, I've done this 100 times and this is the way it comes out. And then they start playing with changing it to the way they like. And modifying it. So a lot of, especially teenagers when they start drawing, you're going to see a lot of characters that look very familiar because that's the way their process works. And then they start creating the original stuff, and that's when it gets interesting. And there's no such thing as original art. Everything's kind of influenced by something else. You know, the idea to create something that's like powerful and has its own themes, and while it might remind you of some other stuff, you know, it has a different power on its own. You know. Anybody got any more questions around?
So I have one question for you. Out of the we've got question, or the characters had great flow and showed movement clearly. I learned a lot.
Right. That balloon and the string. Remember, the string is the spine. That helps you a lot in the beginning.
It's awesome. My only question was, which art style do you personally prefer or lean towards? Do you go more shonen or do you like shoujo?
I think people will consider my own earlier work, like the Tales of Closet stuff. It's very shoujo style, which means the topic about gay teenagers finding each other in high school and the issues, that kind of stuff is considered feminine. But my work in Marvel and superheroes kind of like play with that. So I put a lot of those elements in my stories there. That's why my characters will all like go all over the place with gender and orientation and more emotional and that kind of stuff. So well, I think I do a good mix of shoujo and shonen together, you know. But I lean towards shonen just in kind of like emotional stuff.
It's awesome. Well, I want to thank you so much for being a part of our virtual FanNation this year for
Thank you for having
2021.
me.
It's been amazing to have you be a presenter, and I want to thank you so much for presenting. And I just want to, before I sign out, remind everyone to check out the Ocean County Library website because we're doing a lot more programming for FanNation this week. Check out our YouTube channel where we'll be posting this and then other great programs. So I'm going to end our recording here. I want to thank you so much and have a great evening.
Oh, thank you so much.